Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here. We're here now for the final class of the Talmud series, the first batch of classes we've had with Faur, Faur with regards to Masachet Sanhedrin. We're very much excited for the next batch, Rav. I shall be in touch so we can set that up. Before we begin, just a huge thank you for the series because it has been very helpful. And I'm able to see the numbers of people who watch the recordings, let alone people who just watch it live. And it brings me much satisfaction to see such an in-depth class get such an analytical and in-depth class get so many views. When it comes to recordings, because obviously people want to sit there and analyze it in their own time. And I think it's credit to the way you presented Talmud to us. And as I said, we're very much looking forward to continuing that with you in the next series. So, B'chavod, thank you very much for being here.
Sure, with pleasure. I actually have Omicron, so my voice is a little hoarse. You should be able to hear me. Thank you. So the bad news is that I have Omicron. The good news is that apparently it's not all it's hyped up to be. When I was young growing up, I very quickly realized that when they're predicting a huge snowstorm and they try to get you glued to the TV, and any second now it's going to be this incredible blizzard and the world is soon going to end. So as I got a little older, I understood that they're doing that because they want you to be glued to the TV. I'm happy to say that, at least in my case, minus the sore throat, I'm doing quite well, Baruch Hashem. And I hope that everybody else is doing well. Please tell me if there's a problem with the internet connection. If there is, I have an alternative internet connection, so let me know about that. And I'm going to share a screen with you. So hold on just one moment. Okay, let me just get this. All right, where's the screen? All right. Yeah, so we are dealing today with the sugya. And the first two words in the sugya is Shelosha Menalan. Shelosha Menalan, this is the third sugya in Masachet Sanhedrin. And frankly, the question is a little confusing. I'll share the screen soon, but the question is a little confusing. I say that because, well, the question means Shelosha Menalan. The Mishnah says Dine Mamonot Bishlosha. So Dine Mamonot Bishlosha means that the number of judges that you need in order to adjudicate financial disputes is 3 judges. And hence the question, Shelosha Menalan, from where in the Torah do we learn the law of 3 judges? That's the question. That seems like a fairly straightforward question, but you may recall that in one of the... Yes? Is somebody talking to me? I'm sorry. I think that was just
I think it was just a muting error.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Okay, so right. So you may recall that in one of the previous sugyot we've established, and this was Rav Aha Bered de Rav Ika established, that mideoraita had name kasher. We've established the principle that actually, as a matter of deoraita law, as a matter of biblical law, one dayan is sufficient, right? It's right there in the Gemara in Daf Gimel Amud Aleph on the top of the page there, right? Rav Habir Deravika says that nobody argues that point. That point is not in dispute. And he brings a pasuk. The pasuk says Besedek Tishpot Amitecha, right? And that's in singular form. So the fact that the Torah allows the adjudication with one dayan is right there. And I want to read to you what Harambam says in Hilchot Sanhedrin Perek Bet Halacha Yod Daled. He says, "Ehad shehaya mumchei larabbim," one who has the sufficient expertise and is known publicly as having this the expertise to adjudicate matters. Or notel should be betin, or alternatively, perhaps he's not known publicly as having the expertise, but he's appointed by the betin. He is allowed to adjudicate disputes alone. So what do we see here? That as a matter of biblical law, you don't need three. You need one dayan, right? Just continuing in the Harambam, even though it is permissible for one person to adjudicate such matters, nevertheless, Hachamim would suggest that one should not adjudicate disputes alone. So, therefore, my question is, what is the meaning of the Gemara which says Selosha Menalan? Well, I think the answer should be no. Mideoraita had one dayan is enough, and the Rabbanan you need three dayanim. So why do I need Selosha Menalan? Is the question clear? Right? What I mean, it's like, the Torah is very clear. It's one dayan. It's like, how do I know from the Torah that I need three dayanim? So that's the issue. I want to read to you, because this is actually one of the areas that there appears to be, at times, some confusion about. What is the meaning of the Oraita, right? So usually, I ask, what is the Oraita? Something that is written in the Torah Shebichtav, in one of the 5 books of Moses. That's the Oraita. And anything that comes after the 5 books of Moses, that's Derabanan. So let's think about that for a second. So how do I establish whether a particular law is Deoraita or Derabanan? Well, I look at one of the 5 books of Moses. I look at the Chumash, and I see it's either there or it's not there, right? And this is kind of the standard belief among learned individuals. That's not the approach of Harambam. That's not the approach of Rabbi Yosef ibn Megas. That's not the approach of the Geonim. That's not the approach of Chachmei Andalus. And what I'm going to tell you now is fundamental, not just to understanding the approach of Harambam, Chachmei Andalus, the Geonim, etc., but it's fundamental to understanding Gemara, because the truth is, if you don't have this particular, I call it with humility, I call it the approach. But if you don't have this approach, you just can't understand the Gemara. So let me explain to you, give you the highlights, because this is really a matter on which I need to give a separate class or series of classes. But here are the highlights. Deoraita does not mean that which appears in the Torah Shebichtav. Deoraita refers to those laws which we received from Moshe Rabbeinu, those laws which Moshe Rabbeinu received in Har Sinai or Ohel Moed, and which Moshe Rabbeinu taught us in Ohel Moed. Those laws, and only those laws, are Deoraita. And Rambam refers to those laws as Kabbalah leMoshe Misinai. When you see Kabbalah leMoshe Misinai, not Halacha leMoshe Misinai, Kabbalah leMoshe Misinai. When you see those words, Kabbalah leMoshe Misinai, that means that this is a law that is Deoraita, which Moshe Rabbeinu received from the Almighty and transmitted to the Jewish people. Okay, so now we know what Deoraita means. So it comes out that you can have a pasuk in the Torah, a particular law in a pasuk of the Torah, and I have a Kabbalah leMoshe Misinai. And the Kabbalah leMoshe Misinai is the Oraita. How do I know whether something is the Oraita or not? That's the question. And it's an important question. So the answer naturally would be again, look at the pasuk in the Torah. You either find it in the Torah, the Chumash, or you don't find it in the Chumash. But that's incorrect. Let me read to you. Now I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to read to you what Harambam says, and I want to read it carefully with you, because the ultimate authority through which we determine whether something is the Oraita, meaning Kabbalah leMoshe Misinai, or is not the Oraita, is not whether you find the pasuk in the Torah. It's whether the Hachamim have established based upon their traditions, based upon the Kabbalah, that this is the Oraita or not. Meaning it is the court, the Supreme Court of the Jewish people that has the ultimate, that is the ultimate authority to establish that a particular law is Oraita. And it's not that they establish it, but rather they are the recipients of that tradition. And since they are the formal recipients of that tradition, they also have the authority to transmit that tradition onwards to us. So now I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to read to you what Harambam says. If I could just find it among the 700 different screens. Here it is. I think I got the right one. Okay. We are now reading Al-Chot Mamrim, Perek Aleph. I'm going to read it to you, and please follow along. I assume that you can see the screen because I see a green. Well, hold on. There it is. All right. I'm going to try to make it a little bigger. Bet Din Hagadol Shebirushalayim, which is the Supreme Court of the Jewish people. Hem Ikar Torah Shebe'al Peh. This is the foundation of all oral tradition. Now notice, usually people say Torah Shebe'al Peh is the Rabbanan, Torah Shebe'chtav is the Oraita. Incorrect. Torah Shebe'al Peh does not mean those laws which are the Rabbanan, right? Torah Shebe'al Peh rather refers to the traditions that we received from Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Vehem Amud Ha'orah, and this is the foundation of all law. And from the Supreme Court of the Jewish people, which receive the Torah Shebe'al Peh, the oral traditions of the Jewish people, they therefore are the ultimate authorities on all matters legal. ועליהם הבטיחה התורה שנאמר על פי התורה אשר יורוך ועל המשפט אשר יאמרו לך תעשה. Right? So to accept the authority of the Sanhedrin itself is explicit in the Torah, because the Torah says al pi Torah asher yorucha. So it's explicit in the Torah that the authority, the legal authority to transmit the law lies in the Supreme Court. And this is a positive commandment. Now you notice that all actions related to law, whether it's the Oraita, whether it's the Rabbanan, what is the basis for authority? The basis for authority always lies with the Sanhedrin, right? Let me, and here's an important point. It doesn't matter whether we're referring to things that we received from tradition, or as I said before, Kabbalah leMoshe miSinai, vehem Torah shebe'al peh, which is the Torah shebe'al peh, meaning the authority of the Sanhedrin is absolute in terms of receiving and transmitting those laws from Moshe. There are also the authority with respect to laws that are derabbanan. So you see now we're getting in laws that are derabbanan, things that they established on their own are derabbanan. It could be through the Yad Midot, right? It could be that they established it not as a matter of derasha, but perhaps they established it as just a matter of gezerah or takana. So you see that the authority of the Sanhedrin is absolute. And now I'm going to unshare the screen because this is what I wanted to bring to your attention. Now, so let's now get back to the law of the Dayanim. The law of the Dayanim, as we've established previously, as a matter of deoraita law, deoraita hanamet kasher. Apparently, this is the law that Moshe Rabbeinu taught the Jewish people. This apparently is the law that Moshe Rabbeinu received mipi hageburah, that deoraita hanamet kasher. What is it that gives this law its credence? And here's a question. I'm going to open up. I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer it. So I will allow you to raise your hands virtually and answer this question. What is it that gives this law credence? We said mideoraita had namek kasher. There are two possibilities. Is it the fact that we have a pasuk that says Besedek Tishpot Amitecha? Or is it the fact that the Sanhedrin of the Jewish people transmitted this law as they transmitted it as a deoraita law? Do you understand my question? And I'm going to invite you to potentially answer this question if somebody wishes to answer it. And if you want to answer it, I would invite Sina to, if anybody is raising their hands virtually, you may call on them. If not, it's quite all right. I will answer the question. It's not the pasuk. It is the masoret of the hachamim, of the Sanhedrin, that establishes the matter. I'll give you another example. The pasuk says, "Ukshartam leot al yadecha." How do I know that I have to put on tefillin? I know I have to put on tefillin because we received the Kabbalah Moshe Rabbeinu that I have to put on tefillin. And how do I know that Ukshaltam leot al yadecha refers to tefillin? Because we received the masoret that pasuk Ukshaltam leot al yadecha refers to tefillin, right? So you see that it is essential in the thinking of the Talmud and in the thinking of Chachmei Andalus, right? That we have this masoret, we have this Kabbalah Moshe Sinai, and the ultimate authority, both as to what's the oraita and what's not the oraita, and whether a pasuk means something or doesn't mean something. On both ends, it is the masoret that we receive from Moshe Rabbeinu that establishes, as a matter of law, the credibility of a particular position or of a particular mitzvah or of a particular interpretation of the pasuk. Is this clear? Okay.
So this is exactly what would have irked the Karaites, the power that the Hachamim had in determining deoraita, basically.
Can you repeat your point? I'm not sure I fully...
This seems to be, so the power that the Hachamim had in determining deoraita, this seems to be what irked or bothered the Karaites.
Right, that's an interesting point. And certainly the Karaim would disagree that the text of the Torah is not the ultimate authority, right? And that's an important point. Now, having said that, the next question now is as follows. So if indeed the Pesukim from the Torah are not always the oraita laws, right? Because we just saw that you can have a Kabbalah Moshe Sinai, which is in the pasuk, such as Ukshartam leot al yadecha, for example, tefillin, right? But the fact is the pesukim are there. So I want to read to you, and this is really important. Just a sentence in my father's book, The Naked Crowd. Just give me a moment. I thought it was here, and I will bring it. So what I want to read to you, and this is an important point. What is the purpose? Or one of the purposes of the Torah Shebichtav, right? I say the purpose. I say a purpose of the Torah Shebichtav. So I'm going to read to you on page 71 of the Naked Crowd. All right, and this has to do with my father wrote a lot about alphabetic thinking, and how alphabetic thinking was a unique feature of Jewish epistemology. We always thought in terms of words, in terms of language, and we always not only thought in terms of word, in terms of language, and I'm going to read to you now what he says. The publication of the alphabet is functionally linked to the simultaneous publication of a book to be read with it. This is really interesting. He says that the Jewish people, a little before this, he says, we're the only ones who not only nationally published our books, the Tanakh, the Torah Shebichtav. So the Torah Shebichtav are those books which were nationally published and written down, and the writing, the text, the written text of the Torah Shebichtav are national texts which were formerly published in the archives of the Jewish people. They were placed in the Bet Midrash. but we also published the Aleph Bet, right? So the letters of the Hebrew alphabet themselves were published as the national letters of the Jewish people. So I'm just skipping a little. And he says, once speech is reduced to writing, it loses its magical power. That is voice, intonation, staging, right? And politicians do this all the time. I mean, the intelligent politicians, yeah, there's some, most politicians today are not particularly inspiring, but you have some who are great speakers. Well, today maybe I'm just not listening to the news enough. I can't think of any inspiring politicians today, honestly. But let's say it's certainly over the course of human history, there were many great speakers, right? Now, one of the things about a great speaker is not just the content of his speech, the words, but the way he says it, right? And a great speaker, Martin Luther King, he was a great speaker. He had a certain rhythm, he had a certain intonation, right? It almost had a magical quality to it, right? So that's what speech can do. We don't like that. We like the words to sort of speak for themselves, right? So by committing words to a written text, right, we take away this potential manipulation of the masses through rhythm, right, through intonation, through raising the voice, right, through the theatrics of a great speaker, right? So written texts are really important in Jewish thinking. The publication of a national book creates a contextual point of reference. Wow, that's what I wanted to read, and it's here. What is the point of a national book? It creates a contextual point of reference. If we were now to have an argument about a particular subject, I would be careful even to say, for example, global warming. I like bringing that subject a lot. You believe that we should reduce man-made emissions. You don't believe that we should reduce man-made emissions. You believe that as a matter of science, man-made emissions affects the climate, or you don't believe that it affects the climate, and all the various questions. And if we reduce man-made emissions, well, how would that affect poverty in third world countries? And will people end up freezing to death or not? And as you can tell, I'm trying to be very careful not to let my own personal views on the matter be clear, because it's not something I want to be clear. But nevertheless, we're going to have now this back and forth discussion. One of the problems in the Western world is they don't have a national text. So all discussions, right? All discussions are just reduced to, I feel this way and you feel that way, and I feel very strongly this way and you feel even more strongly that way, right? But is there an ultimate frame of reference for truth? Is there an ultimate frame of reference that we say, here's what we all agree upon, and here's where we all land? We are all founded upon this one land, this one idea, or a multiplicity of ideas, and only the Jewish people can say yes. And the reason we can say yes is because we publish not just our alphabet, but we published our national texts, right? And it's being pointed out here in the text. Well, the U.S. Constitution is a national text, and yet, and I agree, by the way, I think it's a valid point. And yet, there is no obligation for every American. There is no law that says you must read the Constitution every day. Every night, you must read the Kiryat Shema, which is a summary of the Torah, or a summary of the Constitution. Every day, every night, you should be fluent in the words of the Constitution so that you can quote it and it becomes part of your linguistic apparatus, right? It doesn't exist. So the US Constitution is, I think, by the way, one of the greatest documents of freedom in the Western world. I believe that. I think it's great, but they don't have that. They don't have the covenant between the people and the book. Only the Jewish people have that special relationship where we're completely immersed in the book, right? As the great Rabbi Sachs, alav shalom, said, and you probably heard this, we're the only people who dance with our national books on Simchat Torah, right? I thought that was a beautiful idea. So what's the point? The point is that we use the Torah shebichtav as a source of truth, right? So all dialogue revolves around the Torah shebichtav. If my daughter isn't listening to her mommy, right? Her mommy said, wake up early, wake up on time, or you're going to be late to school. And so I can quote, Shema beni musar abicha ve'al titosh Torah imecha, right? It's a pasuk, right? We're always quoting pasukim to our children. We're always quoting pasukim. So if I have now a discussion with you about matters, I'll bring the pasukim in the Torah. How does the Torah view it? And we were trying to analyze the pasukim in the Torah and generate meaning for the pasukim in the Torah. So you see how the Torah unifies Am Yisrael and is the ultimate foundation for all discussion, right? And this is exactly what the Gemara does. For example, when the Gemara here says Shelosha min alam, how do I know that from the standard explanation would be, how do I know from the Torah that you need three dayanim? Well, what do you mean by that question? Do you mean that as a matter of deoraita law, you need three dayanim? Well, you don't need three dayanim as a matter of deoraita law, because everybody agrees that if a dayan yechidi dan, the deen is valid. So what do you mean when you say shalosh min alan? This happens so many times where the Gemara is discussing a rabbinic law, an explicitly rabbinic law, and it's bringing pasukim from the Torah, as the foundation from the discussion. And the answer is that's exactly the point. The context for discussions among the Jewish people regarding all matters always revolved around the pasukim in the Torah. So the sugya that we're about to read in the 30 minutes that we have left is a sugya that has to do with, and don't take this the wrong way. So let me finish my sentence. It has to do with Jewish rhetoric. It doesn't mean it's not important, not at all. It's actually very important. The Chachamim took the analysis of the Pesukim in the Torah, or the Pesukim in the Torah, very seriously, right? It wasn't a free-for-all. You couldn't say whatever you wanted to say, right? So they took it very seriously. So rhetoric in Jewish people was considered very serious matter. So this sugya has to deal exclusively with rhetoric. How do we learn particular ideas from the Pesukim in the Torah, right? But because it's rhetoric, it has nothing to do with Jewish law. Right. If you open up the Rif, Rabbi Yitzhak Al-Fasi, he completely skips the sugya. Well, why does he skip the sugya? He skips the sugya because it has nothing to do with Jewish law. It has to do with rhetoric, which is important. And one of the functions of the Talmud was to teach us how the Chachamim studied the Pesukim, debated the Pesukim, and learned from the Pesukim. But it's not that they learned this particular law from the Pesukim. We already said it previously in the previous sugya, Mishum Yoshev Keranot, the Hakamim established that we have to have a minimum of three dayanim, right? Having established three dayanim, show me in the Torah, where do you know, Shema b'ni musar avicha ve'al titosh Torah timecha, show me in the Torah, bring me the Pesukim, and that's what the sugya does, okay? So with your permission, unless there's some questions, I am now going to read to you the Gemara. I will share with you the screen so that you can see the Surah Adishma Teta. Give me a moment to find here it is, map of Sugya number 3. So let's see, here we go. All right, so let me begin. Here it is. Okay, I'm first going to just give you a quick rundown of the sugya. This is sugya number 3 in Masechet Sanhedrin. The purpose of the sugya, Shelosha min alam. That's a purpose, namely, from where in the Torah do we see the idea of 3 dayanim? And it's not a doraita law, remember that. Okay, so part 1, there's part 2, and there is part 3. So it's a triple sugya. All right. Continuing. Part 1 has 2 main parts. It's actually composed of the Mechilta. The Mechilta expresses the opinion of Rabbi Yoshia, and it expresses the opinion of Rabbi Yonatan. That's part 1. Part 2 also has 2 main parts, yes. The first part explains why there was a divergence in opinion, and it tries to predicate that divergence of opinion based upon a principle called Dorashim Tehilot. That's part A of part 2. And then part B of part 2 tries to predicate the divergence based upon another principle, Bet Din Noteh. And then finally, we have the third part of the sugya. The third part of the sugya deals with the particular law requiring an odd-numbered court, meaning the number of dayanim in the court is odd-numbered. Here we have the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda versus Rabbi Yoshia in part A, and certain questions and refinements in part B. That's the sugya. It's right there. And I am now going to begin reading for you the sugya. So Shelosha Menalan. Where in the Torah, where in the Peskim in the Torah, just give me one moment. I'm sorry about this. To make a little adjustment here. Oh, okay, one of the students just sent me a message. So I want to see. Okay, got it. That was irrelevant, sorry. I apologize for that interruption. Okay, I thought he was sending me a private question that he wanted me to ask in the class. All right, Shelosha Menalan. So again, I explained it. And then we read the various parts of Ilchot Mamrim and this. So the answer to the question is going to be recorded in Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael. There are various collections of Midrash Halacha. As you know, of course, there's Sifra de Verav. Sifra de Verav is a collection of Midrash Halacha, the Pesukim in Vayikra. There's a Sifra de Rabbi Shimon on the book of Devarim. And on the book of Shemot, for example, we have the Mechilta of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We have the Mechilta of Rabbi Yishmael. So this particular passage, it's a Tanur Rabbanan. Tanur Rabbanan is a particular meaning, which I'll explain perhaps in a future class. But it's a baraita that's been established as accurate by the various yeshivot. So that's Tanur Rabbanan. And it brings a Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael. And this Mechilta records a dispute between Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yoshia. An important point about Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonatan, they were both Talmidim of Rabbi Yishmael. They were both Tanaim from the 4th generation. They lived in Israel during difficult times. The Midrash, actually the Sifre in Perashat Re'eh says that they finally took upon themselves to leave Israel, and they reached a particular city to the north. And as they were looking back at Israel, they begun to cry and say, "How can we leave the land of Israel?" And they changed their minds and they went back. So that was Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yishmael were both colleagues. They were both Talmidim of Rabbi Yishmael. And you often see that they are brought, Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yoshia, they're brought together, disputing not a law, but how you learn the law from a particular pasuk. So this is very common. In the Mechilta, you see this a lot. Obviously, in the Mechilta of Rabbi Yishmael, you see it a lot because they were both students of Rabbi Yishmael, right? So you see this a lot, that they're both disputing. How do we learn? Rhetorical disputes. Okay. So here it is. Detanur Rabbanan is the Gemara saying that we have established that this is an accurate, valid baraita, and therefore we can quote it in the context of the sugya. Detanur Rabbanan. ונקרא בעל הבית אל האלוהים. הרי כאן אחד. עד האלוהים יבוא דבר שניהם. הרי כאן שניים. אשר ירשיעון אלוהים. הרי כאן שלושה דברי רבי יושיע. So the first half of the baraita expresses the opinion of Rabbi Yoshia, where in the same section in the Torah, you have the word Elokim appearing 3 times. The word Elohim, of course, in this case means the judge, right? El ha-Elohim. So that refers to the first judge. Ad ha-Elohim refers to the second judge. Asher yashun Elohim refers to the 3 judges. So the idea being that since the word Elohim appears 3 times, we could have just mentioned it once. We have to mention it 3 times. So this is a hint. It's obviously, and you understand this is not literal, right? It's important to point out this is a hint that would suggest that you require 3 judges in financial matters, such as the matter that is being discussed in the Pesukim. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Yoshia. It's very straightforward. Rabbi Yonatan has a slight twist on this. Rabbi Yonatan omer, Rishon tehillah ne'emar, ve'en doreshin tehillot. Rabbi Yonatan says, no, the first, v'nikra b'alabait el ha'elohim, that's Rishon tehillah ne'emar. That's tehillah ne'emar. And we have a principle, Endorshin tehillot. I'll explain that in a moment. And therefore, we cannot use the first Elohim. We are therefore left with only two Elohims. Ella, Ada Elohim yavo devar shenehem arikan echad. Asher shun Elohim arikan shenayim. So how many Elohims do we have? Two. Ve'en bet din shakul. And there is a principle, and the principle is en bet din shakul. You cannot have an even number of judges sitting in a court. And since you can have an even number of judges sitting in a court, we have the two Elohims which are mentioned in the Pesukim, right? And then we know that you have to have a third, right? That's the end of the Baraita. That's the end of the Mechilta. From this point on, the Gemara is now going to be discussing this Mechilta. But first, just a point I want to explain. Endorshin tehillot. So let me explain. So you have the text. And as I said, the text of the Torah can be used as a focal point to discuss matters. And through the art of derasha, of which the Chachamim were experts, we can generate new meanings in the text, right? The new meanings that we generate in the text, right? The derashot that we generate in the text are not part of the text, right? So we have the derashot, and then we have the text. Now, when you want to establish a particular rule from the text, right, it is always because there is a particular discrepancy in the text, and that discrepancy leads us to a certain nuanced thinking about a particular matter. So in this case, the nuanced thinking about the particular matter, the discrepancy is, why does it say the word Elohim 3 times? And that opens up that nuanced thinking. Well, let's see, we have the law of 3 judges. And here we have 3 judges in the Pesukim. Elohim, 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 3 judges. Very nice. So, but that's fine to the extent that there is that discrepancy in the text. If there's no discrepancy, then no, you cannot reach that conclusion. And the problem is the first Elohim is necessary. V'nikra b'alabait el Elohim is there to teach us that we need to adjudicate the matter in the presence of a judge. Because there's nothing unusual about that. There's nothing in that pasuk that would somehow lead us to conclude that, or rather that raises an issue. It's a very simple, straightforward pasuk. So you can't take a simple, straightforward pasuk and say, well, okay, I'm going to use it for a derasha. No, you can't do that. But rather, it's always going to be a particular discrepancy in the pesukim or between the words that would generate the derasha. And that's exactly the principle of Endorshin tehillot. The principle of Endorshin tehillot means that if I am going to now count the number of times a particular word appears for the purposes of reaching a particular law related to that number, I can't count the first word because the first word is necessary for the pasuk, right? That's Endorshin tehillot. There's a mahlokat on this, right? But the point is, Rabbi Yonatan certainly is of the opinion that Endorshin tehillot. So since I need the word V'nikra b'alabait el Elohim to teach us that this matter should be adjudicated by a judge, I can't take that word Elohim and count it towards the 3 judges. That's the idea. And this has to do, again, how do you analyze a text from a derasha perspective, right? So people like to make derashot, and this gives you a clue as to how to make a derasha, right? So if you're going to make a derasha, there has to be something in the text. Maybe there's an extra letter in the word, right? Maybe there's a letter missing in the word. Maybe there's a word that's repetitious, right? So you understand the way the Hachamim analyze text and the way the Hachamim try to generate meaning from text. So that's Rabbi Yonatan. So therefore, he can't learn it directly from the text, but he needs to utilize the principle of En Betin Shakul. That's part 1. So part 1 is the opinion of Rabbi Yoshia. opinion of Rabbi Yonatan. And now we're going to look at the divergence between Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonatan, because remember, this is a purely rhetorical divergence. Both Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yoshia agree that you need 3 dayanim. The question is, how do you generate this meaning from the Pesukim? So let's read now. Nema bedoreshin tehilot kamipalge. Apparently, it would seem that the basis for the dispute between Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonatan is whether doreshin tehilot or not doreshin tehilot. Demol sabar doreshin tehilot. Rabbi Yoshia, who says you count the first Elohim, would say doreshin tehilot. Umol sabar en doreshin tehilot, and Rabbi Yonatan, who exclusively says en doreshin tehilot, is his opinion is clear. Is that the basis for the divergence between these two Chachamim? La dechule alma en doreshin tehilot. Actually, it was the opinion of both Chachamim that en doreshin tehilot. Okay, now I speculate. I don't know for sure, but I speculate that because these Chachamim were both from the Bet Midrash of Rabbi Yishmael, and Rabbi Yishmael omer b'shlosh midot haTorah nidreshet, and because Rabbi Yishmael had a very clear-cut methodology for making derashot on the Pesukim of the Torah, I speculate that in the Bet Midrash of Rabbi Yishmael, they reached the conclusion she'en doreshin tehilot, because there's no reason to assume that Rabbi Yonatan is of that opinion. The only reason to assume that Rabbi Yonatan is of that opinion is based on the fact that he is from the Bet Midrash of Rabbi Yishmael, and on that point, there was unanimity, en doreshin tehilot. So that cannot be the basis for the divergence of opinion or divergence of interpretation between Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonatan. That's not the basis. Continuing. Amalach Rabbi Yoshia, im ken ne'emar kerav v'nikra ba'al habayit el hashofet. Mai el ha'elohim shema mina leminyana. And as far as Rabbi Yoshia, who did count the first Elohim, he would say there is a discrepancy in the pasuk. Right? The idea of Endorshin Tachilot is there is no discrepancy, and if there's no discrepancy, then there's nothing to be learned. There is a discrepancy. It could have said V'nikra ba'al habayit el hashofet, right? If it would have said el hashofet, the idea would have been just as clear. What does it have to say El Elohim? Elohim is a particular word, which of course means the judges. It also can mean the political leaders. So the fact that it uses the word Elohim, it's that itself is a discrepancy. That itself, meaning Elohim versus Shofet, that's where the discrepancy lies. And that's what gives me, Rabbi Yoshia, the authority to count the word Elohim, the first Elohim, and then add the other 2 Elohim. So Shema Mina Leminyana, and therefore I can reach a conclusion that it comes to teach me the law of 3 Dayanim. Rabbi Yonatan says this is not a discrepancy. There's nothing unusual about using the word Elohim, which means judge, to describe the idea of judge, right? And he actually brings a very nice contemporary saying, and the contemporary saying is important. I'm going to explain in a moment why. But for now, the Rabbi Yonatan Lishana de Almanakat. Rabbi Yonatan says that Rabbi Yonatan, not that Rabbi Yonatan says, but when the Rabbi Yonatan said not to count the first Elohim because Endorshin Tahilot, he would say the word Elohim is not discrepant, or rather it's not odd. There's no oddity to the word Elohim because Kid Amre Inshe, there is a saying among the people, Man de'it ledina likrav legabe dayana. If somebody has a financial dispute that needs to be adjudicated, he should go to real judges, legabe dayana, because back then sometimes people would want to go to arbitration, non-judges, non-experts, and that always led to problems and issues. So again, man de'it ledina. If somebody, so the saying goes, if somebody has a financial dispute with his friend, go to a judge. Don't go to a regular person. Go adjudicate it in front of a judge. And the point that Rabbi Yonatan is saying that the reason the pasuk says Elohim and not Shofet is to emphasize go to a real judge with authority. The word Elohim implies authority. It implies knowledge, right? Go to that. And therefore, again, the point being that the word Elohim, there's nothing odd about the use of the word Elohim, and it cannot be used, therefore, Leminyan cannot be used for the counting of three. So here we see that, to summarize where we're at now, we proposed that the dispute between Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yoshia was predicated upon a potential dispute regarding Endorshin Tehilot, and the answer is no. There is no dispute on Endorshin Tehilot. Everybody agrees that Endorshin Tehilot, and therefore now we have to perhaps find another reason for the dispute between Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonatan. And here it is. Rabbi Yoshia let betinote.
Rav, can you scroll down? I think we've,
Is this it? You see Rabbi Yoshia let the betinote. Is that visible? Oh, I'm sorry. My apology. I'm looking at the wrong screen. Okay. My mistake.
I was following it inside, but I realized that on the screen it's
My mechila. Next time, feel free to interrupt me in the middle. I was looking at one screen and showing you another screen, mechila.
no problem.
Okay. So we're up to here. You see Rabbi Yoshia let lebetinote. Is that visible now?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Thank you for letting me know. So Rabbi Yoshia let lebetinote. So this is the second proposal, namely that according to Rabbi Yoshia, there is no principle that requires you to have an odd number of dayanim. Okay. So according to Rabbi Yonatan, who says there is a principle that requires you to have an odd number of dayanim, well, you can understand why you have two Elohims. And then you can learn the third one based upon the principle that you're supposed to have an odd number of dayanim. On the other hand, Rabbi Yoshia, who doesn't have that principle, needs the third Elohim to teach us the law of three dayanim, right? He can't learn it from the principle of betin noteh. So Rabbi Yoshia let the betin noteh. So again, because Rabbi Yoshia doesn't have the law that says you must have odd number of dayanim, he needs to learn it from the first Elohim, and that's why it is a bit of a stretch. Admittedly, that's the stretch, and that's the point of dispute. The point of dispute is exactly here. And so let's continue.
Where's that principle from, though? Is it just that one of them had the tradition, the other one didn't have the tradition?
So we're going to see it right now. That's a very good question. Who asked that?
Avi.
Very nice. So here's going to be the baraita, right? And here's the baraita. Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Yossi HaGalili Omer. Interesting. Now it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, who was a different yeshiva and a different. They had different kelalim of derashot. Very interesting. So almost like Rabbi Ishmael, and here we have a different approach. Nevertheless, he says, "Ma tilmod lomar lintot acharei rabim lehatot." Now, I just want to point out something, and I know we're a little short on time, but it's okay. Let me open for you the pasuk in the Chumash. You need to see the pasuk because otherwise you really can't appreciate what's taking place in the derasha. So give me a moment, please. Here we go. I'm going to open up the pasuk in Mechol Mamre. Okay, fastest way to find something. All right. Here we go. Ivrit, Tanakh. All right, where is it? I think it's Parashat Mishpatim, right? Yeah. Lin tot. All right. Okay. Lintot. All right, so the pasuk says "Velo ta'aneh al riv lintot."
We still see the sugya map. That's what we see.
Yes, and I am now going to stop the share and share the pasuk. Thank you. Here it is. "Velo ta'aneh al riv lintot acharei rabim lehatot." This pasuk, of course, is in Parashat Mishpatim. It's Perek Kaf Bet. And what's important, what's missing here is the ta'amim. So it's Perek Kaf Gimel, my mistake. Perek Kaf Gimel Pasuk Bet. So I'm going to open up the Pasuk. You see the Pasuk in front of you. Right. Velo ta'ane al riv lintot אחרי רבים להטות. Okay, so it says, I'm going to read the pasuk again. לא תהיה אחרי רבים לרעות. That's the first half of the pasuk. ולא תענה על ריב לנטות אחרי רבים להטות. The oddity in the pasuk is לנטות אחרי רבים להטות. The lintot seems to be part of אחרי רבים להטות, right? Now, obviously, if you have the ta'amim, ולא תענה על ריב לנטות, lintot actually belongs to the previous clause. ולא תענה על ריב לנטות. But the derasha and derashot, and this is important, and this is why I want you to see that. I would have preferred that you saw it with the ta'amim, but okay, nevertheless. But the derasha ignores the ta'amim. You notice that, right? Right? It connects lintot with אחרי רבים להטות. And by connecting lintot with אחרי רבים להטות, you create this discrepancy because lintot and lehatot are the same word. I mean, the same different conjugations of the same root, right? So what does it say? Lintot אחרי רבים להטות. You could have said אחרי רבים להטות, but it says lintot at the beginning and it says lintot at the end. That's the question that we are dealing with. And now I'm going to go back to sharing with you the screen of the sugya. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay. So lintot now you understand the derasha. Okay, you see the point of the derasha. Lintot אחרי רבים להטות. So Torah amra aseh lecha betin noteh. So the additional word lintot, אחרי רבים להטות, I know what it means. אחרי רבים להטות means I count the number of dayanim at the end and the majority rules. Lintot means something more. It means when you establish the bet din in the first place, the bet din should be established in an imbalanced way, meaning an odd number of people. So lintot means aseh lecha betin noteh. Make sure to constitute a bet din that itself is imbalanced in the number of dayanim, so that there always is going to be a possibility of אחרי רבים להטות, meaning the way to read the pasuk according to the darasha is lintot, right? Establish an imbalanced number of dayanim in the court, so that אחרי רבים להטות, so that you can have the possibility of אחרי רבים להטות, because otherwise, if you have an even number, you can have the possibility of no rabim, you can have the possibility of 50-50, right? So you see the subtlety of the darasha. It's actually quite. I think it's quite beautiful. So lintot אחרי רבים להטות. Amra Torah aseh lecha betin noteh. From here, we see the idea that one should establish an odd number of dayanim in the court, right? And that's a beraita of Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Yossi Galili. So what would be the basis for Rabbi Yoshia to say no, we don't have to have betin noteh, right? It's a valid question. So Savalak Rabbi Yehuda, because there's another Tana Rabbi Yehuda de Amar who says as follows: Shiv'im. So Savalak Rabbi Yehuda de Amar Shiv'im ditnan. No, Shiv'im ditnan Sanhedrin Gelayat Shiv'im v'Achat. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shiv'im. Okay. He is of. I'm going to read that again. Mechila. Savalak Rabbi Yehuda. אמר 70 תתנן, סנהדרין גדולה הייתה של 71. רבי יהודה אומר 70. Okay. Rabbi Yoshia's opinion that you don't have this overarching principle of odd numbered judges in court is following another Tana, namely Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Yehuda, there's a Mishnah in the first chapter of Masechet Sanhedrin, which says that the Supreme Court of Israel has 71 dayanim. Rabbi Yehuda says no, it has 70 dayanim. 70 is not an odd number, is it? Right? So here we see that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you don't need to have lintot, right? So the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Yossi Galili was not accepted by all. It wasn't accepted by Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yoshia similarly rejected the idea of lintot as an overarching principle. Okay, 3 minutes left. Let's see what we can do in 3 minutes. Okay. Let's go. All right. So to summarize where we're at. I just want to give you like we brought the Mechilta, we brought the 2 derashot. The derashah of Rabbi Yonatan is actually quite clear. Endorshin tahilot, aselecha bedinoteh, and we know how he learns 3 dayanim. The derashah of Rabbi Yoshia is a little more subtle. He says we need 3 Elohims. The reason you need 3 is because he doesn't have the principle of lintot. How can he not have the principle of lintot? He doesn't have the principle of lintot because he follows Rabbi Yehuda. It wasn't a universally acknowledged principle. Okay, that's where we're at. That's the end of part 2. So by the end of part 2, we understand the 2 perspectives, Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yoshia. Okay, that's it. Third part of the sugya deals with the idea of lintot. It goes more deeply into this law. To what extent does Rabbi Yehuda rejected, right? Does Rabbi Yoshia fully rejected himself? So that's going to be the third part of the sugya. I know that we're really not going to have time to finish this third part of the sugya because I see that there's only 2 minutes left. So maybe it would be best to take some questions if there are any questions in the remaining time.
Simon had his hand up. Go ahead, Simon.
I don't understand why the Gemara needs to assume that Rabbi Yoshua doesn't have the principle that there's not an even number baked in. His drasha doesn't need it, but that doesn't mean that he necessarily wouldn't invoke it if his drasha came out to an even number.
Right. First, that's a good question. I think it's a fair question. It's clear that Rabbi Yoshia is stretching things, meaning there is a principle that he agrees with, Endorshin tahilot. And as a rhetorical matter, it would have been far more eloquent to say, Endorshin tahilot, which he agrees with. He didn't. There must be some reason why he rejected that particular avenue or that particular approach. Mm-hmm. And we the Gemara connects that correctly, as we're going to see later. It connects that with another opinion of Rabbi Yoshia regarding, and that's what we're going to see in part 3, meaning in part 3, we go a little more deeply into Rabbi Yoshia's opinion on the matter of lintot. We'll see that, we'll see that more clearly, but it connects it with his opinion on lintot, which is, he doesn't have this limud of Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, right? He doesn't have that limud of Rabbi Yosef HaGalili lintot, that there was an overarching principle that a bet din needs to have an odd number of people. Any other questions?
Can you elaborate on that last point that you just mentioned, that he didn't have that principle? What does that mean in practice? It means that he was not taught it, or what does it mean when you say he didn't have that principle or that limud?
Right. So that's a very good question. So for example, we have Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says you need 70 dayanim, right? Now for Rabbi Yehuda says you need 70 dayanim, for example. You don't have an odd number of dayanim in all cases. So he rejects the idea of lintot. Don't forget, the idea of lintot is a rabbinic. It's a midivrei sofrim, meaning it's not explicit in the pasuk, but rather there is this concept brought by Rabbi Yosef HaGalili who says you should always have an odd number of dayanim, and he learns it from the word lintot. Again, the peshat of the pasuk was lo tiyeh halei rabim leraot lintot, right? Lintot, right? Lo tiyeh halei rabim leraot velo ta'aneh al riv lintot. Lintot really belongs to the first one, but his derasha is a way of supporting his thesis, which is you shouldn't have an odd number of dayanim. But you see that wasn't accepted as an overarching principle by all. Right? That's precisely the point, and that's one of the things that we're going to do in the third part of the sugya. If we do it, in the next, series. Okay, gentlemen, I think
maybe we have to extend the series to another class in the next few weeks if you have time. Okay.
Can I maybe ask very quickly on this?
Yes.
If the Tana Rabbi Yehuda holds Shiv'im is in, what does he need any asmachta or anything for this? Is it a svara? Why does Rabbi Yehuda say 70 is enough? Because he just believes there's no necessity for an odd number. Or does he need more than this? Etana, where does he take the authority to make a klalim?
Right. First of all, that's an excellent question.
How does it work?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. and there's a lot of, I mean, the real question, I think the real question would be, for example, is the law of 71 Dayanim, is it the Oraita or the Rabbanan? That's a real question, right?
Yes.
So what does it mean when the Rabbi Yehuda says it's only 70 Dayanim? What does that mean? Is he saying that you only have 70 Dayanim? I mean, well, how would that work? Because so I'm kind of like, right, it has to be studied properly. It has to be studied in the. I'm not trying to. It's a really good question. As Hillel told that person who wanted, or Shammai rather, told him, lo al regel achat. So Shammai hit him, and Hillel told him that. So the ahavta l'reacha kamocha. That was Hillel's answer, and then the rest go and study. So, but anyway, I want to address the question properly. So for now, I'm going to say the ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and the rest will be for a future class.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Hacham. I really appreciate it. First and foremost, wishing you better. Glad to hear you're coping with it. But please God, you'll recover ASAP. And looking forward to either an extension of the series, given the fact that we have to go through the other part of the sugya, or the next series. But regardless, we'll be in touch. And again, thank you so much for everything. You've enriched us, enlightened us, and made us addicted to studying according to our cherished Geonik Sephardi Hachamim. So thank you very much.
All the best. Kol tov.
Take care. Kol tov. Bye-bye.